In 1443, the Kingdom of Joseon had a literacy problem. The kingdom's written language was Classical Chinese. This was standard across East Asia. Chinese characters had been used for official documents, literature, and scholarship throughout the region for over 1,000 years. In China, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, educated people wrote in Classical Chinese regardless of what language they spoke. The problem was that Classical Chinese was extraordinarily difficult to learn. Mastering it required years of intensive study, beginning in childhood. In Joseon, this meant that the ability to read and write was effectively limited to the nobility and the scholar official class. Farmers, merchants, artisans, and anyone else outside that class could not participate in written communication. They couldn't read laws that applied to them. They couldn't write petitions to the government. They couldn't read instructions, records, or anything else that might improve their lives. A law you can't read can still be used against you. The people it governed couldn't access it. The king had decided this was a problem, specifically his problem as king to solve. He was 45 years old. He was going blind. His scholars were about to tell him he had made a serious mistake. Yido became king of Joseon in 1418 at the age of 21. He was the third son of his father, King Sejong, and should not have been the heir. His older brother had been the crown prince. His older brother abdicated voluntarily, reportedly because he recognized his younger brother's superior administrative and intellectual ability. Yi Tu, who would be known posthumously as Sejong, became king. He was, by any measure, a prodigious administrator. He established a royal research institute, the Hall of Worthies, or Jifyeon-jeon, and filled it with the most talented scholars in the kingdom. He used it to work on problems in astronomy, medicine, agriculture, music, and governance. He personally supervised research into farming techniques, the standardization of weights and measures, and improvements to military technology. He had extraordinary intellectual range. He is credited with advances in meteorology. The first rain gauge in Korean history was developed under his supervision. He oversaw the creation of new musical notation systems. He reformed the legal code. He governed as if the kingdom's problems were intellectual puzzles that sufficient intelligence and sustained effort could solve. In 1443, he turned that approach to the problem of literacy. The scholars opposed him. Their objections were sophisticated, and their spokesman was Chue Manri, one of the most senior officials in the kingdom, who submitted a formal memorial of protest in 1444, listing the reasons the new script should not be adopted. His arguments were several. First, China was the center of civilization. Korea's cultural legitimacy derived in large part from its participation in the Chinese literary tradition. Creating a separate Korean writing system would sever Korea from that tradition and mark it as a barbaric peripheral nation. Second, only the uneducated would benefit from a simple script. The educated, those who mattered for governance, already knew Chinese. Why create a new system for people who were not part of the political conversation? Third, and most revealing, if common people could easily read and write, they would be better able to challenge laws and authority. The difficulty of written Chinese was not just a barrier to communication. It was a mechanism of control. Simplifying access to literacy meant simplifying access to dissent. Sejong heard the arguments. He dismissed them. He continued, "The details of how Hangul was created remain partially uncertain. What is known is that Sejong created it, or directed its creation, in significant secrecy. His hall of worthies scholars were involved, though the extent of their contribution relative to his own is debated. The project proceeded without announcing itself to the broader court, until it was essentially complete. The system he developed was not an adaptation of Chinese characters. It was entirely original. It is phonetic. It represents sounds, not meanings. It has 14 consonants and 10 vowels. These elements are combined in syllabic blocks to form words, making it visually dense enough to satisfy aesthetic preferences shaped by Chinese characters, while being phonetically logical enough to be learned in a matter of hours. Modern linguists consider it one of the most scientifically designed writing systems ever created. It can represent the full range of Korean sounds with near-perfect accuracy. It is systematic in a way that most natural writing systems, which evolve organically over centuries, are not. Sejong was going blind by this point. He had a severe eye condition that limited his vision. He worked by dictation, by consultation, by listening to texts read aloud. He completed the system anyway. In 1443, Sejong announced the completion of the new script. He called it Hunmin Jeongum, the correct sounds for the instruction of the people. He published an explanatory document in 1446. It explained the sounds the script represented, the rules for combining them, and examples of usage. It is one of the few writing systems in history where the inventor's explanations survive. The document begins, "The sounds of our country's language differ from those of China, and are not compatible with the characters of China. Therefore, among the ignorant people, there have been many who, having something they want to put into words, have in the end been unable to express their feelings. I have been distressed by this, and have newly designed 28 letters, which I wish to have everyone practice easily and use conveniently in their daily life." The opposition from the scholarly class did not stop. The script was initially called by scholars eonmun, literally vulgar script. Women, children, and the uneducated used it. Serious writing, serious scholarship, serious governance. All of that was still conducted in classical Chinese for the next several centuries. Sejong died in 1450. He was 53 years old. He had ruled for 32 years. The adoption of Hangul was slow. For most of the Joseon dynasty, it coexisted with classical Chinese without displacing it. Scholars who wanted to be taken seriously wrote in Chinese. Hangul was used in popular literature, in correspondence between women, in vernacular poetry, in fiction. It was not until the late 19th and early 20th centuries, during the period of Japanese colonial rule, that Hangul became a symbol of Korean national identity. The Japanese colonial administration attempted to suppress Korean language and culture. The response was a fierce assertion of Hangul as something distinctly and irreducibly Korean. Today, Hangul is the exclusive official writing system of both North and South Korea. Sejong's image appears on the 10,001 note, the highest denomination in regular circulation. His statue stands in Gwanghwamun Square in central Seoul, facing the direction of the royal palace. The scholars who opposed him are not commemorated. The script they called vulgar is spoken by 80 million people. Sejong the Great is consistently rated in Korean, popular and scholarly consensus as the greatest monarch in Korean history. The title, the Great, is not used casually in Korean historical tradition. He earned it. His range, medicine, agriculture, astronomy, music, military technology, law, and linguistics, is remarkable not because he had broad interests, which many rulers have had, but because the things developed under his supervision actually worked. They were implemented and they improved things. The Hangul story is the one that resonates most because it illustrates something specific. He chose to help people who had no political power to ask for help. Common people couldn't petition him about literacy because they couldn't write. He identified the problem himself, funded the solution himself, and pushed it through against the opposition of every scholar who stood to lose status from it. He was going blind when he did this. He had been king for 25 years and still thought there were problems left to solve. This is the Dragon Throne. We cover the rulers of Asia, and occasionally the ones who actually tried to make things better. Subscribe if this story mattered to you. So new episodes every week.